Tempted in buying a cheap, used BMW 5 Series but worried about it becoming a massive money pit? Well, this time on Road and Race, here are my 9 top tips for getting a good one. I bought a very cheap 5 Series about a year ago. It was 10 years old and had done about 125,000 miles. I've spent a fair amount of time and money repairing all the stuff that was wrong with it, so here's my guide to what to look for if you're thinking of buying one yourself. This guide is based on the E60 E61 model 5 Series, but you may find some points useful if buying any BMW.
Standard features and options. So let's talk about what features you get as standard on this Model 5 Series. You get the iDrive, Bluetooth phone, cruise control, heated wing mirrors, air conditioning, dimming rear view mirror, rain sensing wipers, and front and rear parking sensors. There are an enormous list of options when you're buying this car. So if you're looking to buy one, you'll have to kind of dig around and hunt around and try and figure out what options came with the car. A quick way of finding out is if you can get the VIN number of the car. There's lots of checkers online and they'll tell you which options were actually spec'd when the car was made. Just to give you my kind of highlights, adaptive cruise control was available, adaptive headlights, seat memory, folding and dimming wing mirrors, DAB radio, USB connectivity, active roll bars, and heated seats. Moving on to wheels, the standard 17-inch wheels were coming with run-flat tyres, and these are models 243 and 244. Optional 17-inch wheels are the 245s and 122. In 18-inch sizes, you can also get the 246, 124 and 247. My car, the one I bought, came in the M Sport spec, and for the extra money you get the M5 body kit, which is front bumper, rear bumper, the sports seats, sports steering wheel, and the 18-inch 135M dual spoke alloys, which I think are probably the nicest wheels for this car. If you're looking for a 19-inch wheel, the 172M was an option, and these didn't come with run flats. That's quite good to know. Recall work. Moving on to the juicier stuff. What goes wrong with this car? That's probably why you've tuned in, isn't it? So let's talk about some of the recall work BMW have put out there. In 2015, they recalled the N47 engine, and that's found in the 2-litre diesels, typically the 520D. The chain tensioner may not compensate for extension of the timing chain, and this leads to your engine blowing up. So basically, BMW will replace the tensioner for free, and if they inspect the car and the mileage is over 47,000 miles, they will check both the upper and lower chains and replace them. This is quite an expensive piece of work for BMW because the timing chain's at the back of the engine, and they really won't want to have to replace it because it means taking the engine out. But that's what the recall says. I don't have any personal experience of that, but if you do have any comments about that and you've had this timing chain problem, please let me know in the comments. That particular issue doesn't affect me because I went for the larger 3-litre 6-cylinder engine. But one recall which did affect me was to do with the battery cable. So BMW say, in some remote cases, the battery cable cover inside the boot may be incorrectly mounted. This can result in the electrical system malfunctioning, the vehicle failing to start, and in some cases, charring or fire. So I had this fixed on this car. I just took the BMW, they had it for an afternoon, and then I picked it up. If you live in the UK, you can check if your car is part of a recall. I'll put the link in the description box so you can check that out yourselves. Diesel specific issues. 3 things to bear in mind if you want to go for a diesel engine in your 5 Series. The first is the diesel particulate filter. This basically comes out of the exhaust and filters out all the nasties. It helps with emissions and meeting regulations, things like that. After 125,000 miles though, you'll get a code on your car saying that it is due for potentially cleaning. I've got a whole video on how I clean mine and whatnot, but just be aware that if you're over 125,000 miles, then you'll probably need to deal with that error light and get the system cleaned or replaced. The EGR valve, again, this is to do with emissions. It's the exhaust gas recirculation valve that takes dirty exhaust gases and pumps them back into the engine to help control emissions and fuel economy and things like that. That will need taking out and cleaning. It's a fairly straightforward job. Again, I've got a video on how to do this. But if you don't clean it, it gets clogged up and then that can lead to your turbo failing. So make sure that's been done. And on certain engines, they have something called swirl flaps. These open and close at low revs and basically help again with emissions, but they're made out of plastic and sometimes they snap and sometimes they fall into your engine, which can cause valve problems and basically a massive engine repair bill. So again, check that these have either been replaced, or what you can do is get blanking plates and have them all removed. On this particular engine, my car, the M57 engine, the 3 litre, they don't have swirl flaps, so I didn't need to worry about that. Thermostats. An enormously common problem on most BMWs, well, certainly the 3 that I've owned. The engine thermostat, when that fails, it fails open, which means coolant flows through the engine all the time, which means it doesn't get up to temperature, which leads to increased fuel usage, and potentially this can reduce the life of your engine. There's also a thermostat on the automatic transmission if you have that in your car, and you'll get the same problems if that fails as well. Make sure these have been changed recently. You can do it yourself. I've got a video guide on how to do it. It's fairly fiddly but quite achievable. Touring model problems. If you go for the touring model, the E61 like I have, there are a couple of specific things that are problematic. The first is the boot wiring. Again, I've got a video on this. They put the wiring for a lot of the boot stuff through the hinge in the boot itself. And as you can imagine, all the up and down, over time it wears and you get the cables fraying and stuff not working. For me, the rear wiper washer didn't work. The rear heater didn't work because the cables were frayed. So if you're looking to buy one of these cars, make sure that all those things at the back of the car, all the lights, the actual window wiper, actually work before you buy it. And the second thing, the rear suspension on this car is air controlled. So there's a pump that controls the height of the rear of the car. Again, that fails, within 60 to 100,000 miles potentially. So you want to look, see if that's been repaired or replaced at some stage. You'll get a fault code on the dashboard if it is struggling or having problems lifting the back of the car. You can also see if the car's sitting too low on the back, which would be another clue that the pump's failed. High mileage items. Not really specific to BMWs, most cars will suffer from this type of problem, but just to bear in mind some of the issues I've had. The first one was the rear drive shafts. So this car had never had its rear drive shafts changed, and after about 20 minutes of driving, you'd hear a click, 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 click on either acceleration or deceleration. That's the CV joint inside the shaft failing. That's a very, very expensive part to get changed. So you really, really should, if you don't check anything else, just check that either the drive shafts have been replaced or there isn't a clicking noise on acceleration or deceleration. It took a while for it to kind of manifest, so I actually missed it on my test drive. But take it for a long 20-minute test drive, preferably motorway, and you should be able to then, when you come off the motorway, go back onto normal roads, get the window down, see if you can hear that clicking noise. It's quite apparent. I would assume that if the car's done over 100,000 miles, the drive shafts are probably on their way out. This is a rear-wheel drive car, and they will take a lot of kind of abuse over the time. So that's something to really bear in mind. Secondly, not a problem I've faced yet. I still think this car's running the original shock absorbers, and I've not seen any problems with them. But if you can get behind the wheel and just inspect to see if they're leaking or weeping, it's probably getting to that age after 100,000 miles where the shocks would begin to show signs that they would need replacing. Servicing and paperwork. Like all cars, BMWs have a servicing schedule that should be followed. So make sure there's the paperwork to back this up, so you inspect that when you buy the car. Generally, oil needs changing every 15 to 20,000 miles. The fuel filter every 15,000 miles, engine belts every 4 years, and the spark plugs or glow plugs generally around 60,000 miles. Coolant will also need changing between 3 to 5 years as well. As a bonus, if it's a high mileage car, it's nice to see if the power steering fluid's been changed, differential fluid's been changed, gearbox fluid's been changed. Not many people would do that, but it's always nice. If somebody has done it, you can definitely tell they're an enthusiast and, you know, care a lot about the car, know about the car. And generally when you're buying a car, you know, look at the depth of your tyres, the tread depth, and the condition of the brakes. You can usually see how much meat is left on the brake pads by looking through the alloy wheel. Even better if you can do a electrical systems check and engine check with an OBD2 reader. You get a sense of any problems that are with the car. I use the Carly for BMW app on my smartphone with a dongle, but other, you know, systems do exist. Small items. Just a couple of little small things to bear in mind when buying this particular car. The first one is that there is a scuttle drain which gets blocked. So when the water runs down the windscreen, you'd think that would flow away outside the car. It doesn't really on this car. What happens is it flows all the way down past all the plastic that's at the top of the engine and pools kind of at the bottom of where the brake master cylinder is. There's a tiny little kind of drain and that gets blocked up. And so when I bought this car, there was probably about this much of water sitting in the bottom of this kind of container. So, you know, it's something to bear in mind. Once you've got the car, you can't really check it because it'll take you 20 minutes to take all the plastic off. But if you do buy the car, you know, when you're looking to inspect your car and pull all the plastic off and make sure that that drains, you know, properly, otherwise it'll begin to corrode. And again, a small problem that affected this car, and I think affects quite a lot of BMW, is the rear windscreen wiper. That was going very, very slowly when I bought this car, and then, you know, a few months later it just completely seized up. So if the windscreen wiper does kind of go quite slowly, and if it does make a noise as well, you know that it's not being, you know, taken care of very well, and it's just all kind of beginning to seize up, and that'll be certainly replacing otherwise. Rust. Some good news. Generally, these cars are pretty rust free, really, because they've got like a big, huge plastic under tray, which keeps out a lot of the water and salts. But also, BMW are very proud to say they do a full underside anti-corrosion treatment with partial hot galvanizing and phosphate treatment. Oh, they also do a cathodic dip with your paintwork. I've no idea what any of that stuff is, but apparently it's good for your car not rusting. So there you go, it's good news. Summing up, so there you are. Not all the potential issues you could have on this particular car, but certainly what I feel are the kind of the big ticket items, or the main things to bear in mind. If you'd like to know more, then click this box here and that will show you my cost video showing how much it cost me to repair everything on this car and how much you'd expect to pay if you weren't doing the work yourself. And down here for my list of repair videos showing you how I repaired all the items that were wrong on this car.